A lost book discovered. Constantine Tischendorf went to the British Museum in London to read the Codex Alexandrinus, more than 200 years after it had been presented to the king. This young German count visited many of the great libraries of Europe, and he studied the old manuscripts kept in their vaults. One day in the spring of 1840, he examined some Greek manuscripts in the National Library of Paris. As Tischendorf read the words, his eyes caught the faint tracing of an ancient Greek capital letters under the writing. He moved closer to the window and studied the page. Suddenly, he realized that the faint capital letters made words from the Holy Scriptures. The letters were in the same style as those of the Codex Alexandrinus. The Count turned quickly and beckoned to a librarian. "Tell me," he asked, trying to curb his excitement, "where did this come from? How did the library acquire this manuscript?" "This old book was brought from Italy by Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France. It has been in this library nearly 300 years, I am told. We call it the Codex Ephreme because it is a copy of the sermons of Saint Ephreme and..." Yes, the Count broke in. "But these dim underlying words, do you know anything about them?" "Very little. Scholars have been trying to decipher those words for many years, but none have been able to read more than a few lines. About 10 years ago, somebody tried using chemicals to bring out the writing. Now some words seem a little clearer, but most of them are still too dim to read." Tischendorf leaned over the book and his lips moved as he tried to add word to word. The librarian continued, "You know, in London there is an old copy of a Greek Bible called the Codex Alexandrinus. It is written in the same capital letters as these faint words. This could be as old as that. A Greek professor from the university who has studied this book says that someone must have scraped the letters off the vellum pages of the first book and then written the sermons of Ephreme on the cleaned pages." "What a pity," the Count said. "What a pity to have ruined so valuable a book. France could have had a treasure such as England has. How old do you think this book is?" "If somebody could read those old Greek letters, they could find out," the librarian said. The Count was almost breathless with excitement. "Do you think I would be allowed to try to decipher these words?" he asked. "I think I could, with the help of the Greek professor at the university. God's word should not be hidden under these writings." After many weeks of making arrangements, Count Tischendorf was allowed to take the valuable manuscript to his room. He could not rest until he knew the secret of the ancient writings. One night, by flickering candlelight, the Count studied the pages of vellum. He picked up his magnifying glass and intently examined a passage. The door of his room burst open without warning as Pierre and Andre, two friends of the Count, shouted, "Greetings, Scholar Constantine. We are passing through the court below and saw your light." "We think you should forget your lessons tonight," Andre said as he came closer. "Come with us." "You are kind to think of me," said Tischendorf, leaning back in his chair, "but I cannot." "But why?" Andre persisted. "This work, whatever you are doing, can wait." "Enjoy life while you may," added Pierre. "I cannot agree with you, Pierre. I am enjoying life. For the past few months, I've been making a discovery that has brought great happiness. And..." "Discovery? What is this new discovery you are making?" "What I have found is so wonderful that I could talk about it forever. Here, let me show you." Tischendorf took the candle in his hand and lighted 2 others. He smoothed the pages of the open book before his visitors. "Do you recognize the material of which these sheets are made?" The 2 visitors fingered the vellum. "Feels like a fine grade of animal skin," Pierre remarked. "That's exactly what it is. It is lambskin called vellum. It was used for writing long before paper was introduced. This page, as you can well imagine, is very old. What is remarkable about its being old, interrupted Pierre. It isn't the age of the vellum that makes this book valuable. It is the writing on the vellum that is remarkable. And here is a great mystery. Tischendorf drew the candles closer. Look carefully. Then he used the clean vellum to copy the sermons. Fortunately for us, he was not able to scrape or wash off all the original ink, and these faint marks remain. And now you are trying to decipher and read the dim underlying text? That is my work, replied Tischendorf. Most of the pages never had been deciphered. Soon I hope to have deciphered them all and to have my work published so that Greek scholars may easily read the original text of this old manuscript. If only Tyndale or even the translators of the King James Bible could have read these pages. Andre leaned over the vellum with new interest and fingered it gently. You did not tell us the age of the original biblical text, he said. The original text was written on these sheets of vellum about 400 years after the death of Christ, answered Tischendorf. Pierre spoke slowly. I think I understand now, Constantine, why you find such great pleasure in your work. Constantine took the sheets in his hands. I have dedicated my life to the search for the truth as revealed in God's Word. Are there any other manuscripts such as this? Pierre touched the pages with reverence. This valuable manuscript is not the only one, Tischendorf explained. There is one in England, the Codex Ephreme. In Rome is a manuscript which is called the Codex Vaticanus, because it is kept in the library of the Vatican. Few scholars have ever been allowed to examine it, but I have received word that Protestant scholars may be granted special permission by the Pope to see the ancient manuscript. As soon as I have finished my work on this Ephreme and have published what I have found, I must go to Rome. Are these all? Andre asked. Are these 3 manuscripts all that remain of the books written in Greek in the centuries following the death of Christ? These are all that are known, but there may be others yet undiscovered. Yes, or you are a devoted student, Andre said. Forgive us for being so rude, but promise us that you will go with us some evening. Perhaps, the Count replied, but he was already holding his magnifying glass close to the vellum, deciphering another word of the faint underlying writing. The hours passed and the candles burned low. One sputtered and went out, then another. Tischendorf leaned back and pressed his hands against his aching eyes. He had worked long, but accomplished little. The faint traces of letters were almost impossible to follow. The one remaining candle flickered and made wavering shadows on the walls. The door of the room quietly opened, but the young man did not turn his head. Our visitors welcome, a voice spoke. Tischendorf dropped his hands from his eyes and turned. Oh, it's you, Professor. Come in. You know you are always welcome. He pulled a stool out from under the table and offered it to the professor. Thank you, Constantine, but I have just a moment. It is very late, but I saw the light in your window. I did want to ask you about your trip to London. Were you able to see the famous Codex Ephreme? Ah, Professor, what else would call me to London? A visit with the king, perhaps? The professor smiled broadly. Not for the king would I go to London, but for the Bible, yes. Not only have I seen the precious Alexandrinus, but I have copied large portions of it, and I have compared it with the parts that I have deciphered of my beloved Ephreme. Do you feel, Constantine, that the Ephreme, which you have been so diligently deciphering, is as old as the Codex Alexandrinus? I am fairly certain that there is less than 100 years between them. Have you found differences in the teachings as given in each of the books? Is there any variance? The professor leaned forward, eagerly waiting for the answer. No, the truth is the same in both. The two men were silent for a moment. As the professor rose to go, he put his hand on the young man's shoulder. We should be happy that God, in his providence, has given us so many precious promises and that his word remains unchanged. This is a miracle that he has performed. Think of it. This Ephreme is another link in the chain of truth. Constantine lifted his head slowly. Yes, I am aware of what you say is true, but tonight I wonder if it is worth it all. Worth it all? What possesses you, Constantine? The professor was not accustomed to seeing his pupil in this mood. I mean, worth the time, the mental effort, and the bodily strain. Look at these pages. The letters almost swim before my eyes as I try to decipher the words. The Count almost wept with weariness as he stared at the stained pages lying before him. Then he arose and faced his teacher. Forgive me, sir. Deciphering the Ephreme has caused me no end of weariness. The strain at times seems unbearable. If it were not for the fact that it is God's work, I would have given up long ago. You will contribute much toward the advancement of God's truth. Let nothing hinder you, my son. Tischendorf lighted a fresh candle and set it on the candlestick. Thank you, Professor. And when this is done, I must go to Rome. There I shall see the Codex Vaticanus. I must know how those pages compare with the Ephreme. Indeed, it is a miracle, as you have said, that God has preserved for more than 14 centuries these fragile sheets of lambskin written with his word. Yes?